Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the first session of day one, DIS10. We have a neat panel here with two good guests from Databricks and Informatica. You'll be able to introduce yourselves in just a second. We're going to be talking about how to design an effective data and analytics governance operating
to the M8 stage.
Model.
It's
a mouthful for sure. I think we've been talking about these kinds of things for many years, so this isn't a new idea, but maybe it's been affected by things that are top of mind for people, generative AI and that kind of stuff, and has that changed anything, or is it much of the same? Your respective companies have been around for very many years. What's new, what's changed, and that kind of stuff, but before all that, please introduce yourselves.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm Reza Shoaei. I'm a principal solution architect with Informatica, covering our wide range of capabilities and helping, of course, our customers to realize their use cases.
Erik Ekedahl, account executive at Databricks. Basically means I look after a few of our customers.
Is it Swedish accounts or Nordic?
Swedish accounts, yes.
All right.
Only. Yep, and basically been with Databricks 2.5 years, which is half a lifetime in Databricks terms.
Yeah.
But I have my background in Accenture and Electrolux. I was sort of driving digital transformations, data transformations before I joined Databricks, which is...
I'm going to start off by asking, we're just going to have a neat conversation here that I hope gets the audience a feeling for whether they have the same kind of challenges as other people and that kind of thing. We were talking just a moment ago about public sector.
Yep.
Do you have more public sector or private customers? What is the distribution at Databricks, public and private?
I mean, in the Nordics, it is primarily private. And you have, as you can see, some of the Nordic countries are a little bit more forward-leaning. Finland and Norway typically have a bit more of the kind of public sector customers in cloud already.
Yeah.
Sweden is, maybe you could say, lagging a little bit behind there on the technology side.
Sweden lagging in public cloud in public sector cloud adoption.
Yeah.
Is that your experience as well?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of customers in Denmark, for instance, in Norway, Finland, they are more open to the cloud technology. And that's a little bit more on the guidance from the governance, because it's a public sector, right? And the governance allow to use one form of cloud technology in those countries. However, we haven't got any guidance from the Swedish government yet for that, and therefore it's case by case. And of course, I understand, it's a highly regulated industry, they have sensitive information, but again, we need to also move with the technology, right?
I'm getting the sense in this past year, it's going to be hard to sort of keep track of the red threads here, but that there's been I like the expression that I heard last year, a repatriation of cloud resources to on-prem and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Is that your experience, and what do you think is driving that change?
I mean, I think there's a real question now, right? Where we had for the last few years a movement to cloud, and you start seeing that putting some things in production in cloud can be quite costly, right? And you start looking at, maybe there is a rationale for pulling it back into on-prem, right? But I do think, like, overall, I can foresee that in the next 10, 15 years, there's still a lot of things that's going to move into cloud. And you might, at the same time, have a channel going back with some specific use cases. Consider things like in the energy sector, right? When you drill for oil and gas, you need to process huge amounts of data. It just doesn't make sense to pull that into the cloud. There are other cases like that where you're going to have use cases where you're going to have a governance model, right, around like, okay, so what is, not just the secure way of doing it, but what is also sort of the effective way and the cost-effective way of processing this data. And then maybe pre-processing on-prem, move it into cloud for the kind of last mile solutions, right?
Okay. What do you think is driving?
Yeah, I second that. Again, we need to have governance, guidance, and privacy in place, right? I mean, folks say that it's cloud, we don't have access, especially with the geopolitical situations we are having, and a lot of other things happening in the Europe and surrounding. So yes, there is a kind of fear of where is my data and how it's going to be treated. But again, having a right, proper governance, privacy in place, and a guidance, you can well manage, as he said, on type of a data. When you classify it, maybe some of them you can keep it on-prem. Some of the other things for analytics can go on a cloud and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I feel that we just avoid the topic because of afraid what's going on, or we should get into that, define the policy and processes, and then I think we are good to go.
Do you feel that, okay, well let me ask, Informatica and Databricks, how much are they on-prem versus cloud?
0.
All cloud.
We have a very long history in data management, so we started from on-prem. A lot of technology we have at the beginning, it was on-prem, but 10 years ago, we started to cloudify things, and not just putting things in the container and shoot it in the cloud. No, we start from scratch. And now we only sell cloud technology because that's the future. But of course, we have our customers on-prem, we are supporting that. I would say new customers, cloud only.
Okay. So I have a sense, and I want to see if you feel that it makes sense. When it comes to costs, feels very discussable, right? One thing costs more than another. These things about sort of fear and governance are a bit more diffuse, so let's talk about that in just a moment. But when it comes to cost, it feels like there's two tiers in the cloud. There's infrastructure, and then there's sort of software as a service. And infrastructure is very difficult to replicate with the same level of reliability, scalability, and features as you get from the hyperscalers. So I've worked at many customers where they've set up their own
data warehouses.
Not just data warehouses, but OpenStack, Kubernetes.
Yeah.
They try to get their own private cloud going, and it's pretty good, but it's nowhere near the cloud. I mean, it's not even a comparison.
It takes a lot of people to run it.
It takes a lot of people to run it, and there's a difference between the S3 bucket that you get from Ceph and what you can do with the buckets online. I mean, it's a world of difference. Okay, so it feels like it's hard to compete on price with that kind of stuff, at least for feature parity.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
exactly.
Reliability, encryption, management, scalability, all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, software as a service, which is what you guys are experts in. So I want to hear if this, you're paying for workflows that might be too complex that you don't have the skills for in-house. In Azure, to set up an ML model, it's next, finished. Maybe that's worth paying for, but you will be paying for it.
Yep.
So what is your sense of what it is that's driving the costs and what are people paying for? Why do people choose Databricks?
That's a very good question. I think there's a long background to that, right? So Databricks, as you might know, came out of Berkeley, right? So the founders of Databricks invented Spark, Apache Spark, and invented also the Delta format, right? So we come out of an open source background, right? So you could say a lot of the researchers, PhDs have worked with open source Spark, and then moving into private companies or institutions, they see a benefit of kind of continuing with that, but on a managed service, right? So Databricks has traditionally been extremely bottom up, right? We brought in like the sort of techies, and for a very long time, until the first 10 years out of the 11, 12 years Databricks has been around, there's basically no front end. It was, you go in, you have your notebooks, and you work on it, right? And now in the last year, we started to kind of be a little bit more, customer pleasing by providing some kind of dashboard, some kind of interaction for someone who is not comfortable with coding, right? But I think, what really pulls people in is highly effective compute, right? That's the engine, right? And basically an holistic sort of governance layer, right?
Yeah.
With Unity Catalog, you're able to kind of hold it together end to end, from in machine learning, in more traditional reporting.
Is it fair to say that Databricks has gone from being a tool to being a platform?
I think we're in the direction of there. I think there's a few steps missing, handling transactional data and so on, where, when we get there, I can see that we can fully become a platform that you can build applications on top of across the platform. Yeah.
What about Informatica?
Just a few words on the cost, because that's usually the conversation in the sales we have our customers, right? I'm paying perpetual licenses for nothing, a peanut, and now I'm going to pay you that amount of euros, etc. But what they don't consider is, as you mentioned also earlier, the cost of running the whole infrastructure, the people, the technology, yada, yada, yada. And then you don't see that when you buy a software as a service technology, right? Then you see the operating cost that, of course, we are scattered around our customers, but now on the cloud. Second is the technology. I mean, it's moving fast, right? how many years we have this LLM ChatGPT? I think it's 2 years, right?
A bit over 2 years.
Yeah.
So what you're going to do? Are you going to change the whole infrastructure to GPU now, right? Or invest the whole thing? Or you opt into a cloud technology and as you said, next. So the time and effort you spend on building the whole thing, when you're done, technologies move on to AGI.
Yeah.
And when you're done with that, we are in the planet Mars, right? So
Yeah.
that's the thing, and I think we need to kind of tell our customers about the business value rather than spending time snitching things together. You bring value to your operation, you bring value product faster to the market, and so on and so forth. That's on the cost. But on the Informatica, I mean, we provide, of course, data management capabilities, right? And Databricks and other technologies, we are partner. There are features, capabilities that Databricks doing it very well, but there are other sources, maybe on-prem or somewhere else that the customers want to have managed that.
Yeah.
So there comes the Informatica as a data management platform.
I'm going to ask some tough questions because I think the audience wants to hear the answers to these.
Sure.
One of the things that I have found is very important in organizations that are trying to upskill in AI and take advantage of maybe the competitive benefits of having offerings that their competitors don't have by way of Gen AI and that kind of stuff, is an investment in upskilling. And so both their tech resources, but also their business resources, getting upskilled in what can we do with AI, what's relevant in our business that maybe could benefit from it, all that kind of stuff. And also the tech people, software engineers getting upskilled in AI people getting upskilled in software development, which are like different disciplines really. I find that doing things the hard way is oftentimes a very good way of upskilling the tech people. So Databricks, for example, it is a pain in the ass to set up Spark and manage all that stuff yourself.
Yep.
And that's what you would be paying to get help from Databricks.
Yep.
But I think there's a big upside in that upskilling in doing things the hard way.
Yep.
I am personally a huge fan of doing things as hard as possible to get as good as possible. What is your experience with organizations that, I guess an equivalent would be a little bit not built here syndrome, you know what I mean?
Yep.
What is your experience with customers that want to do things their own way versus the benefits that you get from buying stuff that is sort of proven and packaged and done?
I mean, I think there's a real, I can agree with you that I think as a part of a learning process, if you would learn Databricks by setting up Spark on-prem, there can be a real benefit to that, right? And often when we look into helping our customers build out the kind of enablement journey, right? And it's to your point, it's not just the techies, it's also the management and the business people need to understand the opportunities here, right? It is really a matter of going hand in hand with someone, right? It's typically not do these online trainings and then you'll be all set. Typically want to engage with, if it's someone from professional services or a really good partner that can come in, can sort of co-develop things together, having someone who can show what good looks like, right?
Right.
And in reality, I don't think it matters if you, say, run it on-prem or in cloud in that sense, right? Because even if you would set it up with Spark on-prem or something, you would benefit hugely by having someone who has done that 40 times before,
right,
can show you the ropes, show you the kind of, that's, I think, how you learn, right? Especially on that side. And similarly, I think, for someone on the business side, there you need to understand, what kind of, because it's always going to be you have to invest something, you have to probably make some compromises somewhere, right? And what is possible to let go of without losing the total value of what you're trying to make, right? So I think the training for the business people is maybe more of a, scenario, conversation, how does it play out, right?
Yeah.
Because I think with all this, I don't know if you agree, but with all these, especially Gen AI projects, you look at it and you see the kind of shiny front, it looks pretty good, and then you start getting into the nitty-gritties of doing it, and you start running into a lot of problems, because in most platforms you'll be pushing what is possible to do, right? If you want to have a customer-facing solution. So I think it's, running your scenario planning a little bit longer, right? Try to understand where we're going to be at the end of this, right? Not just pocking things away, but having a plan. If you're building a physical factory or plant, you have a pretty good idea all the way till you open the doors.
Yeah.
A lot, I think, platform building or data projects end up being okay, we have a rough idea where we're going to start. We have no idea where we're going to end up. and you start running, you start investing. You
Yeah.
need to think it through a little bit more, I think, when you and having that sort of governance
That's a
around
good question.
projects, right?
Well,
Yeah,
what,
I mean, I second Eric. I mean, I would say three things: scalability, automation, and agility. Right?
Okay.
I'm a geek guy, right? I have 4 Raspberry Pis at home. I do all the Python and coding, and my wife hates me because everything is automated. But it took me a long time to build that, right? And you don't have the luxury of time in this business. Market is tough. If you're not there, someone is there, or 200 other people are there, right? So it's not going to scale. Yes, it's going to work in a year or two, but it's not going to scale in your enterprise. Maybe medium size, a small size, yes. Enterprise at all. Scale automation. I mean, doing the whole things on the Prim, you may not get the automation that you get in Databricks, or you may not get the automation and Wizard that you get in Informatica, right? As you said, next, versus the whole mouth to set up something. Agility. I mean, LLM. Who's going to host LLM on-prem, right? And then these models are getting more advanced and smarter. So when you're done with your first model, I was listening to the Davos, the CPO for OpenAI. He was saying that from 3.5 to 4, it took them like 6 months, 4 to 4 point something, it takes them 1 month. It's fast, moving fast, right? So yes, to some extent, maybe they are part of the operations that you can offload to your on-premise stuff or your what you are building. And I love having people who knows what they are doing, right? But again, at this era where we have everything low code, no code, software as a service, we don't need people to know assembly or quick basic to be able to write a code.
Yeah.
We need someone who knows advanced Python.
but it's easy for you to say you already have the skills, right? It's like me now. I like Vim, but sometimes I just use Visual Studio because it's easier. And so you can say I don't have time for it. But what about the people that don't have the skills and don't have the time? You sort of have to build the ship and sail it at the same time. Do your customers do that, or do they? I mean, like, how do they think about it?
I think this is to kind of steer into like the operating model question, right? Because I've been, say, the last 3 years working with maybe 60, 70 companies, some more, some less, right? But all of them, when they come to a certain size at least, have the same problem. It's how do you sort of balance some sort of central muscle, right? That maybe runs the platform, at least provides some basic level of hosting some kind of platform for data and AI, for data management, for data governance, right? And the people that are closer to the business side of things, right? Closer to the actual day-to-day work have the expertise of what you're gonna what is the problem we're trying to solve, but where sometimes have or sometimes has not the kind of technical skill to be able to kind of pull it off, right? And how do you sort of set it up that the people that knows the why and the what can interact in a kind of way that is productive with the people that knows how?
Yeah.
Because it is, I don't know how many times I've seen the kind of friction that becomes, people on the house side are not interested in explaining why it is how, and the people over here is just like, yes, give it to me, we need it.
Yeah.
It's like, but why do you need it? And then like that collaboration, and I think it's a lot about, to your point, right, the enablement, right? Like you need to meet at a certain point where, to say, the more technical people will have an understanding of what kind of overarching business is trying to achieve. And you need, from the, say, business side, really to understand some of the technical limitations and opportunities you have. So I think it's that journey of setting up an operating model which allows, the central team to be that muscle that supports, but for having actually the kind of team spread out, more distributed in the business, to actually deliver some kind of value, right? I see that is, I think, the biggest hinder for scaling.
That fits very well with the federated model, right?
Yes,
you have
exactly.
the folks on the data office or console who has the knowledge and expertise, and you have folks on the nodes which are business, right? They are good with their business. They don't know Python. They don't know anything about databases, but they are good with their business, right? That's what they are there. And then having those folks, as you said, enable them, guide them to use the technology in a right and correct way. Hey, you may find a group that are too deep down. Why not? Give them whatever they want. But those folks who want to have more kind of value out of their business, give them more software as a service, low code, no code.
And can I just say what I think one of the absolutely best use cases for Gen AI, if we say broadly, right, I think is translating natural language to code. Because it takes away that barrier, right? All of a sudden, anyone can be a SQL coder, right? Anyone can write decently good Python code if they know some syntax, right? Yeah. And from like natural language to SQL, it's almost immediately there. And I mean, that democratization is quite fantastic, right? Because all of a sudden you can, put the CFO, which traditionally maybe is not a coder, in front of, you can talk to your data, right? And that's pretty fantastic. Yeah. That's pretty fantastic.
I'm wondering, does Informatica have professional services as well?
Yes.
How much of the professional services are focused on pure engineering versus this kind of sort of software business development upskilling, I would say?
Yeah. I mean, I can answer for Databricks quickly. I would say that professional services at Databricks is extremely technical. There may be individuals that have a tendency towards having a conversation around sort of transforming the business, but they are 100% focused on the technical things, right? So you would rather than bring in the kind of the enablement team or the business value team to start talking about those things, right?
Do you guys go hand in hand with companies to do that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of partners, right? I'm sure it's similar to you, right? Small ones, large ones.
What about the success that you see at companies when you sort of onboard them or run through projects? Are they more successful when you go in with partners that are sort of business development people, or
absolutely.
What are the common factors among those that succeed more versus those that sort of have trouble?
Yeah. On the professional services, we offer both the engineering side and also the advisory side. Because when you start the project at the beginning, it's more about the process and organization and less technology. It's like you have your nice car parked outside, you don't have a driving license, right? So it's more enabled the organization to understand what are the business use cases and how and what they need to realize those use cases. So that's our advisory, and then gets into the projects levels and different engineering sides, take the customers in hand. And again, as we said, I mean, partners, it's key. I mean, we are good sized company, but okay, we don't have all the people in the world, right? And we need partners to help to kind of bring the customers not just on the technology, but also on the process and other stuffs. So we are hand to hand with our partners, global, local, and so on.
Do customers need that kind of help? I mean, what proportion benefit from that kind of outside sort of project management / leadership?
I think a lot too. I think it's a really good question, right? Because I think we often talk about like the kind of triangle, right? You definitely need to have the internal people, right? Because otherwise you don't get the kind of continuity. But you need to get your tech vendors in. I mean, it can be advisory or it can be sort of hands-on support from, say, Informatica, Databricks, Microsoft, whoever it is, right? And then you need your kind of consultants probably that can come in, like someone who has done this before, right? Come in with experience, either technical experience or running that type of project, right? When you get that kind of triangle going in the right balance, and that balance might shift over time, right? In the beginning might be a bit heavier on the externals, and over time it's much heavier on the internals, right? But I think that's a lot of customers we see are not thinking necessarily that way, right? They're using what they have rather than strategically putting together the right type of team for the right type of problem. And I think this is something we have a lot of conversation. I'm sure you do as well, like a lot of conversations on how do you run this successfully. And it doesn't really matter if it's say, building a platform, integrating with the tool, running a Gen AI project. It's kind of that pyramid is going to look different, right? But it's going to be there.
Let's spin this one for a second because I want to hear organizational structures that work and that don't work. But just for the audience now, Databricks and Informatica existed before ChatGPT was a thing. Has anything changed with the dawn of Gen AI? What customers are asking for? And also in the offerings, have you adopted all that quickly, or are you true to the core, or how are things changing?
Well, I mean, at Informatica, AI is not a new topic, right? So it was long before, and a lot of companies use AI, machine learning, and some other things to do automation and scalability, right? And then Gen AI comes on top of it, so LLM. And It's more on the generative part, right? So helping to crunch the information and then, as you said, different languages, but understand what the person is asking and then realize it on whatever technology or process is required, right? So that's one thing. Because sometimes the expectation is very high. I put the LLM, the whole business is perfect, 200% productivity. No, it's not going to work like that. So Informatica adopt the LLM because it brings a lot of innovation and automation. And then we say, okay, how are we going to use it in-house? So how we can do those repetitive tasks now more automated. Right? So instead of having like 200 clicks to design a mapping, now I can ask the tool, this is my use case, build it for me. Or have this mapping, optimize it for me, right? These things that is really good LLM on that one. And then on the other side, how we can help our customers to build their LLMs, right? They are using Databricks, they are using different infrastructures, how we can orchestrate the whole thing. Agentic AI, nowadays is more thing, agents, agentic, and so on and so on. Orchestrate, build the whole thing. So LLM for Informatica users, how we can improve their productivity, and LLM for our customers, how we can help them to build it.
No, but I think there were two big shifts with. I just joined, I think a month before ChatGPT launched, and my gut feeling was a little bit like, I think Databricks was plateauing a little bit, like in terms of like how it's going, right? Back in, 22, right? And then it just took off like this, right? And I think we come from a very...
So Gen AI gave you a big boost, would you say?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of reasons, right? One is that, as I mentioned, right, we were very bottom up, right? So I speak to our field CTO. He was speaking to, say, directors, managers. All of a sudden, the CEOs wanted to speak to him, right? So it was a big shift in that, because I think people all of a sudden started to understand, what is this? Like, what is possible to do, right? I think for us also, we acquired Mosaic ML,
right.
Kind of integrated that into our core of Databricks. And I think we also realized that some of these things are probably not taking the direction we want. Like, people are not training like, fundamental models. They're not, very little pre-training, right? It's too expensive. Very little kind of fine-tuning as well, to be honest, because things are so good. You might do a little bit, right? But it's not a huge business. So we sort of kind of saw like, okay, there are some things that are going to stay, they're going to work, and some things are probably going to, you have to take that another direction.
You just call me next time and I'll tell you where it's headed.
Good.
But yeah, okay, well that's cool then that Gen AI really gave a boost. I think the hosting and the platforms and the tech stuff is one thing, but one thing I've been struggling with my customers and even at the workplace I'm at is the expectations of the business in terms of how to do things. I just thought about it when you said agentic. Explaining what an agent is and how it works is not easy. I mean, you can say it's an AI that goes around and does things by itself. They get that. But what does it need to get the job done? It needs tools, it needs information, it needs access, all sorts of things. And it's not obvious to people. No. So this is maybe a good segue into what project organizational setup and structure that has been more successful in the customers that you've engaged with and ones that definitely haven't been successful. Let's start off with the ones that definitely don't work, because that's funnest for the audience. I mean, we want, perhaps if they recognize, oh shit, that's me, what setups are ripe for catastrophe in terms of organizational structure and that kind of stuff? I guess the first one is buy all the cool shit and then figure out what to do with it. That seems like an obvious one, but what else?
But I think oftentimes an extremely decentralized setup is going to be at least very, very costly and very inefficient, right? If you say you're basically building small islands of platforms across the organization, different tools, you'll have multiple teams maintaining it, you might not be able to share data, right?
Yeah.
So I think actually the totally centralized has probably a better chance of having some level of success, at least initially, than a fully centralized.
Let's do some hot takes here. So we have fully centralized, basically distributed. And you would say that if that's what you have to choose from, the fully centralized has a greater chance of success. Yeah. Do you have the same idea? What do you think?
I will usually go with a hybrid approach, having both ends, right? But one thing, regardless of the architecture, is that the AI should be responsible, should be ethical and secure, right? Because we are talking about enterprise. We are not talking about me chatting with a tool and then it could hallucinate, no problem, right? It's a customer on the other end. I mean, we heard a lot of a story, right? I mean, having a ticket with $1 on the, page, or having a different type of things. So it's very important for organizations, regardless of architecture or what, to have these three factors. And then we get to the architecture. All right. Groups, people, they are in a different domains and way of working, right? Finance use cases is not the same as the logistics.
Right.
So if you train an LLM, which is serving both, you don't get the proper answer maybe out of it, right? So then it comes the agentic and those. So it's centralized in a means that the orchestration and the front end could be centralized. It's decentralized when it comes to the agents that are specifically trained for specific domains and area.
Right.
And then aggregate those, respond to the users, and then have this traceability and responsibility and all those things that you need to impose.
What is the equivalent of self-service in the age of Gen AI?
Good question.
You guys come from democratization and self-service of BI, advanced analytics and everything, and that's the whole thing. Now you have notebooks, you can do it yourself, so on.
I think Databricks has, and I think a lot of our competition and partners also has. We have something called Genie, right? Which is basically, it's our sort of self-service approach where you can basically create a room for users with some sort of access to certain data in it, and they can talk to the data with sort of natural language, right? And it's that use case. You can create graphs, you can do things, you can have conversations, you can come back a week later and ask it to update and so on, have a feed of it. I think the self-service today might not be necessarily, or tomorrow at least, might not be necessarily building dashboards, right? It'd be a different kind of interaction with data than, your traditional reports or dashboards.
Right.
You might want to invest more of that time in how do we automate things properly, right? How do we kind of maybe disrupt this business process over here or combine these two business processes, and you make the kind of self-service, you take that up a notch, right? From either being able to download something for Excel or being able to build a report, you start being able to talk to your data. Maybe you can sort of build an agentic layer on top of that as well, so you can sort of, go do that as well, right? So I think this is what self-service will starting to look like already today. I think there's a huge potential in that tomorrow, right?
What do you think?
Informatica sits a little bit on the top level where it's more metadata than the actual data. So for us, self-service is our data marketplace, where it's a one-stop shop to find what do I have in my enterprise, right? I mean, I'm in different organization. I don't know anything about the IT. I know what I'm looking for, so I need to go and shop it, right? So like, the e-commerce we are using, right? You don't know where the product is, which warehouse, even which country, but you know what you're looking for, you find it, you read the terms and conditions and all those things, and then ask for it, right? So self-serviceness from the user point of view, we should make it as simple as possible, right? I always love the Steve Jobs way of working. Look at it from the user and then build your way back, rather than from the IT and build a monster that no one is going to use. It's a perfect monster, it's work fine, but no one is going to use it.
Yeah.
So from the end users, how can I make it as simple and not dumb, but simple and easy way to find something, and then how I can streamline the whole thing to get into different products, reports, and so on and so forth.
I think this ties into sort of what is expected from the business users and the tech users when it comes to product ownership. We've talked for many years about data product owner and other stuff, and I suggested last year that we need to have an AI product owner, and people don't like the idea that it's called AI product owner and whatnot. But at the end of the day, somebody needs to be responsible for a service that's running somewhere that's supposed to do something that's business critical. And the stakeholder is the business person, not the tech person at the end of the day, really, whether it performs as expected. So for instance, the system prompt. Maybe reasonably, one could say that that's something that the business owner should be responsible for. And the system prompt maybe is a kind of metadata that belongs to the service. Do you see sort of business users getting involved in the Gen AI stuff, or is it still very held in ivory towers by IT people and engineers.
I think there's a lot of interest, right? But I think to your point, the ownership piece is still very vague when it comes to a lot of things in data, right? Like I mean, where I work, a lot of my colleagues come from other companies. We're a few people that come out of the data space, right? And I think the data space is pretty particular in its lack of kind of clear structures and governance, right? If you work towards HR and sales, as a salesperson in a company, you have pretty clear processes, you have pretty clear roles and responsibilities. When you start moving into the data space, it's pretty fluid, right? You might have a CIO, you might have a CDO, you might have none of those. You might buy someone else who's responsible, or like often it's a little bit unclear where the boundary between, say, the central IT or central digital and the kind of business side, who owns what here, right? Like, I think where it really works is when you start putting, say your policies or your governance thinking really with a muscle of actually kind of shifting data around, right? So I worked for one of the large defense companies, right? And obviously their data is pretty sensitive. They're selling systems to multiple countries, should be pretty separated. What we did there was that we lifted in the governance policy function was the data engineering team. You can't have an ivory tower, right, to your point. If you have an ivory tower here, which sits and produces, whether that's Gen AI solutions or it's policy documents around governance, right? I mean, this is in your space, right? But really like putting muscle behind the policies, that's a real kind of trick to get things going, I think.
I fully agree. I mean, we need to have a clear roles and responsibilities definition. I mean, when things are ambiguous, people don't know what they do, right? I mean, what's my role? What is data ownership? What is data stewardship? And so on, and custodian, some people call it. So what are those definitions? And it's not a new job role, right? It's a new capability or new way that you add to your stack of other things, right?
Yeah.
Second thing is that usually enterprise, they take the governance and analytics very lightly. I mean, they think it's a good to have, where usually they hit the wall with the fine or some other things and oh shit, we need to do it. So don't take it lightly. As you said, executive sponsorship is key, right? Why should I do it? I don't want to do more things, right? But again, when it comes from the top leadership team, hey, these are the benefits, right? I'm not forcing you, but these are the benefits for our customers. This is how our customers are going to experience our product in this way. And these are the roles and guidelines and responsibilities, right? When people know, they like it. They start applying that. Oh, I take the ownership. I take this responsibility for that, and so on and so forth. And of course, tools are enablers. Tools should not be a barrier. I should not have 10 tools to do my job. We should have it stream simple so they know what they need to do, and this is the tool to do it.
Unless you want to do everything the hard way.
That's you.
That's me. All right, time to name drop. One feature that's new and cool in Databricks and Informatica, respectively.
I would say AI, BI, Genie, dashboards. It's the self-service layer. Which
Genie that helps out with all that kind of stuff.
The Genie is basically your room when you can speak to your data.
And it understands the Databricks ecosystem well, so it understands storage, queries, and everything.
It sits on top of Unity Catalog. It sort of understands your metadata.
Can it make changes?
To some extent.
Okay, but it's mostly to assist.
It's mostly to assist.
Okay,
yes.
That's cool. What about Informatica?
I would call it Claire. That's our AI engine, and it has two phases: the GPT phase, and then the Copilot phase. I personally like the Copilot. It makes the life super simple.
Is that for automation and stuff?
For automations, building things, and so on, by just telling the tool the use cases. And Informatica, as like yourself, it has a wide range of services. So the first question, which one should I use, which fits well for my use case, from the speed or from the cost? That does the job, and I love it. And the GPT is just, since we are on the metadata level, so we have the catalog from across the customer's landscape, they just query, where do I have my customer's information? Oh, there. Where do I have that? Give me the overview of that one. And folks love it. And so, again, LLM on top of the Informatica or Databricks, I think it brings a lot of productivity and efficiency. And remember, it's not about replacing people's job, is that we make them free to do other value to the company, right? People fear that it's going to replace me. No, I'm going to give you time so you can bring value more to my company rather than building and spending time on those things.
Excellent. Boys, we've been talking for 40 minutes. I feel like there's a lot of exciting new stuff relating to LLMs and other stuff that will give access to tools that have been perhaps only been more accessible to engineers before, but now will be more accessible to more people in companies.
Yep.
And I'm pretty excited about that. Thanks for being here.
Cheers. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. We will be right back with another session.